A young female soldier stood trembling in the center of the barracks, surrounded by her entire unit, as she raised the scissors to her waist-length black hair and began cutting jagged chunks that fell like wounded birds to the concrete floor. Tears streamed silently down her face, yet her eyes burned with fierce determination as she destroyed the beautiful hair that connected her to her ancestors. A desperate ritual she believed might finally silence the vengeful spirit that had followed her from her grandmother's village in the Philippines to this remote military outpost. If you love stories that explore the collision between modern life and ancient beliefs, where brave individuals face supernatural forces beyond understanding, please subscribe to our channel. Now for more haunting tales of courage in the face of inexplicable darkness. Ever since Private Maria Santos had disturbed the ancient burial ground during a training exercise, strange things had been happening. Whispers in empty rooms, shadows moving against the wind, and most terrifying of all, the screaming that came with every storm, growing louder as her grandmother had warned it would until she made the necessary sacrifice. 3 weeks earlier, Maria Santos had been excited about the training exercise. Deployment to the remote base in Mindanao was her first assignment after completing advanced training, and though it meant being closer to her grandmother's homeland than she had been in years, she was still thousands of miles from her parents' home in California. The 21-year-old private had enlisted against her family's wishes, particularly her grandmother, who had begged her not to return to the Philippines even in uniform. "Some soil remembers the blood it has tasted," her Lola had whispered, clutching Maria's hands. "Some grounds hold grudges." Maria had dismissed these warnings as the superstitions of an old woman. Born and raised in San Diego, she considered herself American first, Filipino second, though she honored her heritage through small rituals, never cutting her hair, keeping a small ancestral altar in her footlocker, wearing the protective amulet her grandmother had pressed into her palm before she departed. Their unit had been tasked with navigating through the dense jungle surrounding the base, part of a joint exercise with local forces. Sergeant Miller had paired Maria with 3 other soldiers, placing her on point because of her language skills. "If we encounter any locals, Santos, you're our translator," he ordered, adjusting his pack. They had been hiking for hours when they came upon the stone markers, half hidden by vegetation. Peculiar carvings decorated the weathered surfaces, faces with elongated features and strange symbols Maria didn't recognize. Their local guide, a middle-aged man named Eduardo, had immediately become agitated. "We go around," he insisted, pointing to a steep path that would add hours to their journey. "This place not for disturbing," Sergeant Miller had scoffed, checking his GPS. "We're already behind schedule. What's the problem with this area anyway?" Eduardo had crossed himself, a gesture that seemed at odds with his otherwise modern appearance. "Old burial ground. From before the Spanish bad spirits here." "Superstitious nonsense," Miller had muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Santos, tell this guy we're cutting through. We're not disturbing anything, just passing through." Maria had hesitated, uncomfortable with dismissing the guide's concerns so completely. Her grandmother would have heeded such warnings, but she was a soldier first, culture second. "He says it's an ancient burial site, sir. He believes it's spiritually dangerous." "Well, we're not here for a cultural sensitivity seminar. We've got coordinates to hit before nightfall." Miller gestured for the unit to move forward. "Just tell him we'll be respectful." Maria had translated, trying to sound reassuring, though Eduardo's expression remained troubled. As they moved among the stone markers, she felt a strange prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as though being watched by unseen eyes. The jungle had fallen unnaturally quiet, the usual cacophony of birds and insects replaced by heavy silence. "This place is creepy, specialist," Jensen muttered beside her. "Like walking through a cemetery." "That's basically what it is," Maria replied, keeping her voice low. "We should move through quickly." As they navigated between 2 particularly large stone markers, Maria's boot caught on an exposed root, sending her stumbling forward. She instinctively reached out to catch herself, her palm landing squarely on one of the carved stones. The moment her skin made contact with the weathered surface, a jolt of something like electricity shot up her arm. "Dios KO," she gasped, reverting to Tagalog as she jerked a hand away. "You okay, Santos?" Jensen asked. Maria stared at her palm, where a faint red outline matching one of the carved symbols seemed to have appeared before fading almost immediately. "Yeah, just ... static shock or something." Eduardo had been watching her, his expression grave. He approached, speaking rapidly in a local dialect. Maria only partially understood, but she caught fragments. "Chosen, and it knows your blood." "What's he saying?" Sergeant Miller demanded, growing impatient. Maria shook her head, not wanting to translate the guide's warnings. "Just superstition, sir. He's still unhappy we're here." They continued through the site, Maria increasingly uneasy. The mark on her palm tingled, though no visible trace remained. As they reached the other side of the burial ground, she felt a sudden cold draft, like a sigh of relief or perhaps a whispered threat. That night in her bunk, Maria dreamed of the stone markers, but in her dream they were standing upright like people, their carved faces animated with expressions of anger. She woke to the sound of wind rattling the windows of the barracks, though when she checked the time, 3:33 a.m., she noticed no one else had stirred. Stepping to the window, she could see the trees outside standing perfectly still. Yet the sound of wind continued. In the days that followed, Maria noticed small, strange occurrences. Her personal items would be rearranged in her footlocker, the protective amulet from her grandmother repeatedly turning up in odd places. During showers, she would feel cold spots that no one else seemed to notice. Most disturbing were the whisper snippets of Tagalog, too faint to make out words but distinctly in a woman's voice that seemed to follow her through empty corridors. She told no one. As the only Filipino-American woman in her unit, she was already conscious of standing out, didn't want to add superstitious or mentally unstable to the way she differed from her peers. Instead, she performed small protective rituals. Her grandmother had taught her as a child: salt in the corners of her bunk, bay leaves under her pillow, prayers murmured before sleep. A week after the training exercise, a storm hit the base. Maria woke to the sound of wind screaming outside, not howling but screaming with a human voice that rose and fell in what sounded disturbingly like her own name. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, to find Specialist Chen watching her from the next bunk. "Do you hear that?" Maria whispered. Chen nodded. "Weird storm. It sounds almost like someone screaming." Maria finished, feeling cold sweat break out across her skin. But in the morning, no one else mentioned the strange sound. When Maria cautiously brought it up at breakfast, Jensen laughed. "Just a typical monsoon season storm, Santos. Welcome to the Philippines." But Maria knew better. Whatever had been disturbed at that burial site had followed her back to base, and somehow she knew it was only beginning. Maria needed to speak with her grandmother again. The abrupt ending to their call and the cryptic mention of a ritual left her with more questions than answers. After 3 failed attempts to reconnect via her shattered phone, she sought permission to use the base's secure communications. Lieutenant Rivera, the officer in charge of communications, watched Maria with concern. "Family emergency, Santos." "Yes, ma'am. My grandmother is ill. I need to speak with her." Not entirely a lie, something in her grandmother's voice had suggested urgency beyond the supernatural situation. 10 minutes, Rivera said. "That's all I can authorize without paperwork." Once alone in the communications booth, Maria dialed her grandmother's number with shaking fingers. The old woman answered immediately, as though she had been waiting by the phone. "Maria Salamots a Dios. I've been trying to reach you, Lola." The call dropped. "You were telling me about a ritual, a sacrifice." Her grandmother's voice lowered. "Listen carefully, child. What follows you is ancient, older than our Christianity, older than the Spanish conquest. It is tied to our bloodline because our ancestors once made a pact with it." "What kind of pact?" "Protection in exchange for recognition. But over generations, the pact was forgotten, the offerings stopped. Now it is angry, seeking acknowledgement from the blood that once honored it." Maria glanced nervously at the booth's glass door where Lieutenant Rivera waited outside. "Lola, how do I stop it? It's getting stronger. In our family, the women have always been the bridges between worlds. Your great-grandmother faced this spirit, as did I in my youth. Now it has found you, the next in our line." Her grandmother's voice trembled with emotion. "The sacrifice is personal, Maria. For the Hangin na Sumasigo, you must offer what connects you to your ancestors, your pride, your identity." "My hair," Maria whispered, understanding instinctively. Her hand went to the thick black braid that hung down her back. She had never cut her hair, not once in her 21 years. Her grandmother had taught her that a Filipino woman's hair was her spiritual strength, her connection to generations before her. Yes, cut it all with ritual prayers and offerings. Burn it as an acknowledgement of the spirit's power. Only then might it release you. Might. Her grandmother was silent for a moment. "Sometimes the spirit wants more than hair, Maria. Sometimes it wants blood." Cold fear washed over Maria. "What do you mean?" "Your great-grandmother gave her hair and it was enough. When it came for me, I gave my hair but also suffered a miscarriage, your mother's twin. The spirit took what it wanted." Her grandmother's voice broke. "I fear what it might demand from you. But why now? Why me? You disturbed its resting place. You touched the stones with hands that carry our bloodline. Now it remembers the old pact, the old promises." Maria struggled to process this information. "Lola, this sounds like madness, superstition." Her grandmother finished. "Yes, I know how it sounds to your American ears. But you have seen it, felt it. The Hangin na Sumisigo is real, Maria, and it will not stop until it receives its due." Lieutenant Rivera tapped on the glass, pointing to her watch. Maria nodded, acknowledging the time warning. "I have to go, Lola. Tell me quickly, exactly how do I perform this ritual?" Her grandmother detailed the necessary elements, specific prayers, items, to gather the proper moon phase. "Most importantly, you must be witnessed. The spirit demands public acknowledgement. In the old days, the whole village would observe. Now, ... double quotes. She trailed off. "My unit, they would never understand. Find those who have already seen glimpses of the truth. Gather them as witnesses." And Maria ... "Yes, Lola. Whatever happens, do not show fear. The spirit feeds on terror, grows stronger with each trembling breath. Stand firm even as your heart quakes." After the call ended, Maria remained seated, staring at her reflection in the darkened monitor. The face that looked back seemed older shadows, beneath her eyes, hair already looking lank and lifeless, as though the spirit was sapping its vitality. That evening, Chen found Maria in the barracks bathroom carefully examining her scalp in the mirror. "You okay, Santos?" Chen asked. Maria lowered her hands. "If I told you something impossible, would you think I was crazy?" Chen considered this, leaning against the sink. "After what I've seen around you lately, try me." So Maria told her, not everything but enough. About the burial ground, the presence that followed her, the connection to her bloodline. Chen listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful rather than dismissive. "My grandmother was from rural Taiwan," Chen said. When Maria finished, "She believed in spirits too, said our family home was protected by the ghost of my great-grandfather. I used to think it was just stories, but ... double quotes," she shrugged. "There are more things in heaven and earth, right?" "Shakespeare," Maria said, surprised. "I was an English major before I enlisted." Chen smiled briefly before becoming serious again. "What does your grandmother say you should do?" Maria touched her long braid. "Something I'm not sure I can do." That night, the worst storm yet descended upon the base. The wind howled with unmistakable voices, sometimes speaking Tagalog, sometimes in languages Maria didn't recognize but somehow understood on a primal level. Promises, threats, and treaties, all swirling in the gale that seemed focused entirely on the barracks where she lay trembling. "You hear it, don't you?" Maria whispered to Chen in the bunk beside hers. Chen nodded, her face pale in the emergency lighting that had activated when the regular power failed. "It's saying your name. And something else I can't quite ... It's asking for recognition," Maria translated, though the words came not from her mind but from somewhere deeper in her blood. "It's reminding me of a promise made by my ancestors." Across the room, Jensen sat up. "Will you two shut up about the wind? Some of us are trying to sleep through this nightmare storm." But Maria noticed how Jensen's hands clutched her blanket, how her eyes darted nervously toward the windows where rain lashed like fingernails against glass. Others were awake to watching Maria with expressions ranging from annoyance to fear. They all hear it, Maria realized. They just don't want to admit it. Outside, a particularly violent gust shook the building, the screaming rising to a pitch that made several soldiers cover their ears. In that moment, Maria felt something inside her shift. Knowledge, certainty, purpose. She knew what she had to do, and it couldn't wait for the proper moon phase or ritual preparations. The Hongi Nasu Misigo was done waiting, and so was she. In the days following the violent storm, Maria's condition deteriorated rapidly. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, her once vibrant complexion turned ashen, her movements becoming sluggish as though she were moving through water rather than air. Sleep eluded her entirely whenever she drifted off. The woman in white appeared beside her bed, mouth open in a silent scream that jolted Maria back to wakefulness. During morning formation, she swayed on her feet, nearly collapsing before Chen steadied her with a worried glance. Sergeant Miller noticed. "Santos, my office now," he ordered after dismissing the unit. In his sparse office, Miller studied her with a mixture of concern and frustration. "You look like hell, Private. When's the last time you slept?" "I'm fine, sir. Just adjusting to the climate." Miller's expression hardened. "Don't bullshit me, Santos. Something's going on with you. Is it drugs, homesickness? What?" Maria stared at a point just past his shoulder where she could see the faint outline of the woman in white hovering, invisible to Miller but growing more solid to her perceptions daily. "Nothing, sir. Just need some rest." "That's exactly what. You're going to get you off duty for 48 hours, report to medical for evaluation, and get some damn sleep." "That's an order." "Yes, sir," Maria responded, knowing sleep was impossible. In the medical bay, the doctor found nothing physically wrong despite Maria's clear exhaustion. "Your vitals are normal, Santos. Blood work shows no infections or abnormalities. This appears to be stress-related, perhaps combined with sleep deprivation." He prescribed sleeping pills, which Maria accepted but had no intention of taking. Surrendering her consciousness with the entity so close seemed like inviting possession. Back in the barracks, Maria found a small package on her bunk. Inside was a delicate silver cross with a note in Chun's handwriting. "My grandmother said spirits fear blessed silver. Worth a try, right?" Maria slipped the necklace on immediately, feeling a momentary warmth spread from the metal. Whether psychological or supernatural, the gesture touched her. Someone believed her, someone was trying to help. As day shifted to evening, Maria stood in the bathroom, examining her reflection. Behind her own image, she could now clearly see the woman in white, no longer hiding in peripheral vision or fleeting glimpses. The entity looked eerily similar to Maria herself, but with hollow eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently shaped into a howling oval. As Maria watched her own reflection, the entity's features began to overlay hers, their faces merging in the mirror. Maria stumbled backward, crashing into a shower stall. A passing soldier heard the commotion and peered into the bathroom. "Santos, you okay in there?" "Fine," Maria gasped, struggling to her feet. Just slipped, but she wasn't fine. The boundaries between herself and the entity were blurring. Sometimes she found herself speaking Tagalog words. She didn't know, singing unfamiliar melodies that felt ancient in her throat. In the mess hall, she sat alone, other soldiers increasingly avoiding her strange energy. Only Chen remained loyal, bringing her tray to Maria's isolated table. "You need to do the ritual," Chen said quietly. "Whatever it is your grandmother told you, it needs to happen soon." Maria pushed rice around her plate with no appetite. "I need specific items. Some can be improvised, but others... She trailed off, staring at something Chen couldn't see. Chen snapped her fingers before Maria's face. "Stay with me, Santos. What items? Maybe I can help." Maria blinked, focusing with effort. "Sampaguta flowers or jasmine as substitute. Coconut oil, blessed candles, and ... Double quotes. She touched her braid scissors. "I can get those," Chen assured her. "When next new moon? 3 days from now." Chen studied her with concern. "Can you hold out that long?" Maria wasn't sure. The entity's presence was becoming constant, a shadow attached to her own movements, a voice layered beneath her speech. During weapons training, she had terrified everyone by reciting what sounded like an ancient incantation while field stripping her rifle. She had no memory of speaking at all. That afternoon, Lieutenant Rivera intercepted Maria as she wandered aimlessly near the perimeter fence. The lieutenant was Filipino-American like Maria, but several ranks higher and not someone Maria knew well. "Walk with me, Private," Rivera said, gesturing toward a quieter area of the base. They walked in silence for several minutes before Rivera spoke. "The other officers are concerned about your behavior, Santos. There's talk of psychological evaluation, possibly evacuation to a facility in Manila." Maria's heart raced. "If they removed her from base before the ritual..." "I'm just tired, ma'am. It will pass." Rivera stopped, fixing Maria with an intense gaze. "I grew up in a small village not far from here before my family emigrated. I recognize what's happening to you." Maria froze, uncertain how to respond. Rivera continued, her voice lower. "My cousin experienced something similar after a school trip to an ancient site. The elders in our village performed ceremonies." "It helped you believe in such things, ma'am?" Maria asked carefully. Rivera's expression remained professional, but her eyes softened. "I believe there are aspects of Filipino heritage that defy Western explanation, and I believe you're in trouble, Santos. Real trouble." Relief flooded Maria. Another ally, another believer. "Yes, ma'am, I am." "Tell me," Rivera commanded. Maria explained everything: the burial ground, the haunting, her grandmother's guidance, the ritual she needed to perform. Rivera listened without interruption, her expression grave. When Maria finished, Rivera was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she said, "The new moon is Sunday night. I'll arrange for you to have private time in the barracks by volunteering your unit for evening maneuvers. You'll be excused for medical reasons." "Thank you, ma'am," Maria whispered, tears of gratitude. Threatening. "Don't thank me yet, Santos. The Hongin na Sumisigo is not easily appeased. My cousin gave her hair, but the spirit demanded more." Maria swallowed hard. What happened? She lost hearing in one ear. The spirit screamed. It took something permanent from her. As twilight descended, Maria returned to the barracks, finding a small pouch tucked beneath her pillow. Inside were items her grandmother had described for the ritual: blessed salt, dried herbs, a small vial of oil. Attached was a note in Chen's handwriting: "Expedited delivery from my Taiwanese grandmother, who says to tell you, spirits everywhere follow similar rules. Stand strong." That night, as Maria lay awake, she felt the entity closer than ever. In the darkness, she saw it hovering directly above her, its face now a perfect mirror of her own, its mouth moving in sync with the wind outside. "I know what you want," Maria whispered to it. "I know who you are." The entity's expression shifted, something like surprise rippling across its features before it dissolved into the shadows. But Maria knew it hadn't gone far. It was merely gathering strength for what was to come. 3 days. She had to hold out just 3 more days. The night patrol assignment should have been routine. A standard perimeter check with 3 other soldiers. Maria had insisted on participating despite Lieutenant Rivera's concerns, arguing that maintaining normal duties might help her hold on to reality. Now trudging through the dense vegetation surrounding the base, Maria questioned that decision. The jungle seemed alive with whispers. Every shadow held movement, every rustle suggested presence beyond animals or wind. The other soldiers noticed nothing, though. Occasionally, Private Mendez would glance nervously at Maria when she stopped suddenly, head tilted as though listening to voices only she could hear. "You okay, Santos?" Mendez asked after Maria froze mid-step. For the 3rd time. "Fine," she responded automatically, though she was far from fine. The entity had been growing more aggressive, more physical. That morning, she had discovered bruise-like handprints on her arms, as though someone had grabbed her while she slept. Now, as they patrolled, the entity seemed to be guiding her deeper into the jungle, away from the others, away from safety. They approached a small clearing when Maria saw her, the woman in white standing among the trees, her form more solid, more present than ever before. But this time, Maria wasn't the only one who noticed. "What the hell is that?" Mendez gasped, raising his rifle. The other soldiers turned confused until they too saw the figure. Their flashlight beams passed through her, illuminating nothing, yet she remained visible, a contradiction of physics and reality. "Hold position, Corporal," Davidson ordered, his voice tense. "Santos, what is that?" But Maria couldn't answer. The entity was beckoning her specifically, one spectral hand extended in clear invitation. Without conscious decision, Maria stepped forward. Santos maintained position. Davison barked. The entity's mouth opened in that familiar silent scream, and suddenly the night air was filled with howling wind that hadn't existed moments before. The trees bent violently, debris whipping through the air as the soldiers ducked. For cover, Maria alone stood upright, facing the apparition as leaves and small branches pelted her exposed skin. Mine, the entity spoke the word in Tagalog directly into Maria's mind. You were mine as she was mine and her mother before her. The blood remembers even when the mind forgets. Then the entity was rushing toward her, not walking but flowing like water across the clearing. Maria felt frozen, unable to move as the spectral form collided with her, not passing through but merging into a body, an icy invasion that dropped her to her knees. Santos, he heard Davidson shouting seemingly from very far away. We need a medic. The world tilted sideways as Maria collapsed fully, the earth rising to meet her. Inside her mind, she wasn't in the jungle anymore, but standing in a village she didn't recognize, surrounded by people in ancient clothing who nonetheless, it seemed familiar. A ceremony was underway, a young woman, her ancestor, offering her cut hair to a formless entity that swirled like wind-given substance. Remember, the entity whispered through time, through blood. Remember the pact. When Maria regained consciousness, she was in the medical bay, Lieutenant Rivera standing beside her bed with the base chaplain and the medical officer. Their faces registered equal parts concern and unease. What happened? Maria asked, her voice hoarse. The medical officer consulted his tablet. You experienced some kind of seizure during patrol, Private. Your team reported unusual weather phenomena, and ... double quotes. He hesitated, glancing at Rivera. Hallucinations that multiple soldiers experienced simultaneously. Not hallucinations, Maria whispered. The chaplain, a Methodist minister from Georgia, stepped forward. Private Santos, I understand you may come from a cultural background with different beliefs, but I want to assure you that whatever you're experiencing, God's love and protection. With all due respect, Chaplain Maria interrupted, this isn't something your prayers can fix. Rivera dismissed the chaplain and doctor, requesting private time with Maria. When they were alone, she locked the door and sat beside the bed. It's getting worse, Rivera stated, not a question but an observation. Maria nodded, pushing herself to sitting position. It touched me, Lieutenant. Entered me. I can feel it inside now, waiting. The ritual needs to happen tomorrow night, Rivera said decisively. I'll handle the arrangements with Chen's help. Can you hold out until then? Before Maria could answer, she noticed something on her forearm, a marking exactly like the symbols from the burial ground stones. She showed Rivera, who examined it with clinical detachment. It's claiming you, the lieutenant said finally, marking its territory. Why me? Maria whispered. Just because I'm Filipino. Because I touched the stones. Rivera's expression softened, slightly. From what my grandmother taught me, spirits like this one choose specific bloodlines to attach to. Your family must have had a connection generations ago. When you disturbed its resting place, it recognized your blood, remembered the pact. Lieutenant, do you think? Maria hesitated, gathering courage. Do you think it wants more than my hair? Rivera didn't answer immediately, her silence more telling than words could be. Finally, she said, I think you need to be prepared for that possibility, Private. As Rivera left Maria alone, she became aware of another presence in the room. The entity stood in the corner, watching, not threatening but waiting. In the light of the medical bay, Maria could see her more clearly. The resemblance to herself, but also to her grandmother, to generations of women in her family. The entity's form shifted between ages, sometimes ancient, sometimes young, always female, always with her face. What do you want from me? Maria asked aloud. The entity moved closer, not walking but simply relocating between one blink and the next. Its mouth opened, but instead of the silent scream Maria had come to expect, it spoke in a voice that echoed as though from the bottom of a well. Recognition, respect, renewal of promises made. What promises? I don't understand. Protection for blood. Blood for protection. The entity's form flickered like a malfunctioning light. Your ancestors knew, they forgot. You will remember. Maria's heart raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. And if I give you what you want, my hair, a sacrifice, will you leave me in peace? The entity's expression shifted, something like hunger passing across its features. Peace has a price. Are you willing to pay it? Before Maria could respond, the entity dissolved into shadow. But the marking on her arm burned as though freshly branded, a constant reminder of its claim upon her. That evening, as Maria returned to the barracks, she found an envelope on her bunk. Inside was a small brass key with a note from Lieutenant Rivera. Supply Closet B. Everything you need is there. Tomorrow night, 2,200 hours, your unit will be on night maneuvers. The barracks will be empty except for Chen, who volunteered to stay behind with you. Maria clutched the key, her decision made. Whatever the cost, whatever the entity demanded, she could no longer live with this haunting, this slow possession. Tomorrow night she would face the Hangi na Sumisigo and either appease it or surrender to it completely. News of the incident during night patrol spread through the base like wildfire. Multiple soldiers reporting the same apparition created a division among personnel. Those who believed something supernatural had occurred and those who insisted there must be a rational explanation. Mass hallucination, the base psychologist suggested during a hastily organized briefing for officers, potentially caused by indigenous fungi releasing spores with psychoactive properties. It's documented in scientific literature. But Corporal Davidson, who had been on patrol with Maria, rejected this explanation vehemently. "With all due respect, ma'am, I know what I saw and it saw us back." It recognized Santos specifically. Sergeant Miller cleared his throat. "Santos has been acting strange for weeks. Maybe the others picked up on her anxiety and it influenced what they thought they saw. It wasn't just visual," Private Mendez insisted. "The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. The wind came from nowhere. Equipment malfunctioned simultaneously." The base commander, Colonel Fletcher, rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated by this disruption to normal operations. "Until we determine what happened, all personnel are restricted to base. No training exercises in the jungle, and Private Santos is to report for psychiatric evaluation immediately." Lieutenant Rivera, who had remained silent throughout the briefing, spoke up. "Sir, if I may, Santos is from a Filipino background. Some of what she's experiencing might be better understood through a cultural lens. I'd like permission to consult with local experts." Fletcher eyed her skeptically. "Lieutenant, we run a military base, not a cultural exchange program, but," he sighed, 24 hours. "If your cultural experts have insights that our medical staff lacks, bring them forward. Otherwise, Santos gets a one-way ticket to the psychiatric unit in Manila." Meanwhile, in the barracks, Maria had become the center of intense curiosity and speculation. Some soldiers avoided her completely, giving her bunk a wide berth as though her condition might be contagious. Others, particularly those who had witnessed the entity firsthand, regarded her with newfound respect or fear. Jensen, who had previously dismissed the strange occurrences, now approached Maria cautiously. "Santos, that thing in the jungle, ... what was it?" Maria looked up from packing her essential items for the ritual. "Something from my ancestors' time, something I disturbed, and it's attached to you somehow." Maria nodded, touching the mark on her arm, which had darkened overnight. Jensen's eyes widened when she saw it. "Jesus, Santos. That looks like a brand." Other soldiers gathered, hearing Jensen's exclamation. They stared at the distinctive marking, their expressions ranging from horrified fascination to outright disbelief. "That's the same symbol from those stones in the burial ground," Mendez observed. "The ones the guide warned us about." "It's just a rash," Private Cooper scoffed, though he kept his distance. "Santos probably picked up some tropical skin infection." "Infections don't form perfect symbols," Chen countered, joining the group. "And they don't cause winds that appear from nowhere, or make electronics malfunction, or create apparitions that multiple people see simultaneously." The barracks divided physically as well as ideologically. Those who believed gathering around Maria's bunk, those who didn't, clustering on the opposite side, engaged in loud, dismissive conversation. "I've got your back," Santos Davidson said quietly, having entered during the commotion. "Whatever's happening, whatever you need to do to fix this, I'm in." Maria felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Corporal. I might need witnesses tonight." Davidson nodded, understanding without requiring further explanation. "How many?" "Tradition says the whole village, but..." Maria glanced around at the divided barracks. "Anyone willing to stand with me without judgment?" By afternoon, the division had spread beyond the barracks. In the mess hall, soldiers separated into distinct groups: those who had witnessed supernatural events, sitting together talking in low, urgent voices; those who maintained skepticism, loudly proclaiming rational explanations. "It's a psychological contagion," Cooper insisted, loudly enough for Maria to hear across the room. "Santos is having some kind of breakdown and suggestible people are getting pulled into her delusion." Sergeant Miller tried maintaining order, but even he seemed uncertain where to place his belief after hearing multiple consistent reports from soldiers he trusted. The base chaplain moved between tables, offering spiritual counsel that satisfied neither the skeptics nor those who had witnessed the entity. In this atmosphere of tension, Lieutenant Rivera found Maria after lunch. "My grandmother is on base," she said without preamble. "I convinced Colonel Fletcher she's a cultural expert, which isn't entirely untrue. She wants to meet you." Maria followed Rivera to a small conference room where an elderly Filipino woman waited. Unlike Maria's own grandmother, who embraced aspects of both Catholicism and indigenous beliefs, Rivera's Lola appeared thoroughly modern in dress and demeanor. "This is the one?" she asked Rivera in Tagalog, studying Maria intently. "Yes, Lola. The entity has marked her." The old woman approached Maria without hesitation, taking her marked arm and examining it with clinical precision. "Show me your palm, child." Maria extended her hand. The old woman traced the lines with a fingertip, nodding as though confirming something. "Your bloodline is old, carries power." The entity recognized this. She released Maria's hand. "You understand what must be done?" "I must cut my hair, perform the ritual." Maria touched her long braid. "But will it be enough?" Rivera's grandmother didn't answer immediately, her gaze distant. Finally, she said, "The hangin na sumisigo is hungry after long dormancy. It may want more than hair." "What more?" Maria asked. Though she feared the answer, Blood sacrifice was traditional in the oldest times, not human death but permanent offering. The old woman touched her own ear, which Maria now noticed was slightly malformed. A piece of yourself given willingly. Maria swallowed hard. My grandmother mentioned something similar happened to her. These spirits follow patterns. What was given before will be demanded again. Rivera's grandmother reached into her bag, withdrawing items wrapped in banana leaves. These will help strengthen the ritual. Use them with what you have already gathered. As Rivera escorted her grandmother out, Maria remained in the conference room examining the additional ritual items. They were more potent than what Chen had procured, sacred oils passed down through generations. Specific herbs that Maria recognized from her grandmother's healing practices. Small, carved tokens of protection. Upon returning to the barracks, Maria discovered her footlocker had been searched, her original ritual supplies confiscated. Sergeant Miller stood nearby, arms crossed. Contraband check, he explained without apology. Found some interesting items in your possession, Santos. Care to explain the chicken blood? Maria's heart sank. The ritual components so carefully gathered now gone. It's for a traditional ceremony, Sergeant. A blessing. Miller's expression remained skeptical. You're confined to barracks until further notice, Private. Colonel's orders. As Miller left, Chen approached, looking apologetic. They took everything. Maria nodded, clutching the small bundle. Rivera's grandmother had given her her last remaining hope. Almost everything. Outside, thunder rumbled, though the sky had been clear moments before. The entity was growing impatient. Tonight would be their confrontation, ritual or no ritual, preparations or none. Maria could feel it in her blood and the mark on her arm, in the whispers that followed her everywhere now. It's coming, she whispered to Chen, ready or not. As evening approached, the sky darkened prematurely, thick clouds gathering over the base with unnatural speed. The air grew heavy with impending rain, yet remained unnaturally still. No breeze, no movement, as though the world were holding its breath. In the barracks, Maria sat on her bunk, surrounded by a small group of allies, Chen, Davidson, Mendez, and two others who had witnessed the entity during patrols. The rest of the unit had been ordered to the mess hall for an informational briefing that Maria suspected was simply a way to keep them away from her. They took my supplies, Maria explained, examining the meager items from Rivera's grandmother. It's not enough for the full ritual. What exactly do you need? Davidson asked. The corporal had been skeptical initially, but after witnessing the apparition in the jungle, had become one of Maria's strongest supporters. Maria listed the components: blessed candles, specific herbs, coconut oil, jasmine flowers, or, if possible, most crucially, a container to burn the hair once cut and prayers written into Tagalog. I can get candles from the chapel, one soldier offered. The mess has cooking oil, Mendez suggested. Not coconut, but maybe olive would work. Chen was already making notes. What about the prayers? Do you know them? Maria shook her head. My grandmother was going to send them, but she gestured to her confiscated phone. As they discussed alternatives, the barracks door opened and Lieutenant Rivera entered. She glanced at the gathered soldiers, then focused on Maria. Private Santos, report to my office immediately. The others exchanged worried glances as Maria followed Rivera out. They walked in silence through the administrative building to Rivera's small office, where the lieutenant closed the door and drew the blinds. The colonels decided to evacuate you to Manila tonight, Rivera said without preamble. Medical transport arrives at 2,300 hours. Maria's heart sank. Tonight, but the ritual, the new moon. I know. Rivera reached into her desk, withdrawing a manila envelope. My grandmother prepared these for you. The prayers, instructions, everything you need. Maria accepted the envelope, hands trembling slightly. It won't matter if I'm not here, Lieutenant. Rivera checked her watch. The transport is delayed. Mechanical issues that will take approximately 4 hours to resolve. Unfortunately, during that time, communications will experience unexpected difficulties. Colonel Fletcher and Sergeant Miller will be occupied with an urgent matter concerning base security. Maria stared as understanding dawned. You're helping me. I'm ensuring operational readiness by addressing a potential threat to this base. Rivera's expression remained professional, though her eyes conveyed deeper understanding. Whatever is affecting you, Santos, it's growing stronger. The weather patterns alone are concerning our meteorologist enough to recommend evacuation protocols. Thunder rolled outside as if emphasizing her point. Rivera continued, I've spoken with your grandmother in the Philippines. Maria looked up sharply. You called my Lola? Rivera nodded. She's quite worried about you. She told me something interesting, that she performed the same ritual when she was young, that her mother did as well, that in your family the women have always been. She hesitated, searching for the right word, conduits between worlds. Did she tell you what the spirit took from her, besides her hair? Rivera's expression grew solemn. Yes, she lost her unborn child, your mother's twin. The revelation hit Maria hard, though she had heard it before. The entity's hunger, its demand for blood sacrifice, suddenly felt more real, more threatening. Lieutenant, what if cutting my hair isn't enough? What if it wants more from me too? Rivera considered this question carefully. My grandmother believes the offering must be proportional to the disturbance. Your grandmother disturbed the spirit through a personal transgression. You awakened it from decades of dormancy at its actual resting place. The implication hung heavy between them. Maria touched her arm where the mark had spread, growing darker, more defined. It's going to demand a significant sacrifice. The choice is yours, Santos. The transport to Manila is real. You could leave, avoid the ritual altogether. But Maria knew better. It would follow me. It's in my blood now, not just haunting me. I have to face it. Lightning flashed outside the window briefly, illuminating Rivera's office in stark white light. In that flash, Maria saw the entity standing behind the lieutenant, watching, waiting its patience, clearly wearing thin. Rivera hadn't seen it but noticed Maria's expression. It's here, isn't it? Maria nodded. It's always here now. Lieutenant, I need to know my grandmother when she performed the ritual. Did she know what the spirit would take? No. The sacrifice is revealed during the ritual itself. The spirit makes its demand when properly acknowledged. This uncertain element terrified Maria more than anything else. Not knowing what permanent piece of herself might be claimed. Yet the alternative was worse. The entity was growing stronger, feeding on her life force, her cultural connection, her very identity. Left unchecked, it might eventually consume her completely. I'll do it tonight, Maria decided. During the new moon, but I'll need help. Rivera nodded. You have allies willing to stand with you, and you'll have approximately 4 hours while the base command is distracted with other matters. As Maria left Rivera's office, thunder cracked directly overhead, the first fat drops of rain beginning to fall. The storm had finally broken, mirroring the decision within her. In the barracks, she found her small group of supporters had grown. Word had spread, and those who had witnessed supernatural events or simply believed Maria's account had gathered, bringing what ritual components they could. Salvage candles from personal supplies, oil from the mess hall, even wilting flowers from the base commander's secretary's desk. Is this enough? Chen asked, as Maria examined their collective offerings. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Yes, thank you, all of you. What exactly are we doing here, Santos? A specialist named Ramirez asked. Some kind of exorcism. Not exactly, Maria explained. More like fulfilling an ancient agreement, acknowledging a spirit that's attached to my bloodline and offering it what it wants in exchange for peace. And what does it want? Someone asked. Maria touched her long braid, my hair for certain, perhaps more. Davidson frowned. More like what? I won't know until the ritual begins. Maria's voice remained steady, though fear churned inside her. In my family, the spirit has taken different sacrifices each generation. My grandmother lost her unborn child. A hush fell over the group as they processed this information. Finally, Chen spoke. Are you sure you want to do this? It sounds dangerous. Maria met her friend's concerned gaze. I'm sure I don't want to do this, but I'm more sure that I have to. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the window's wind, beginning to howl with that now familiar human quality. The Hungin Nasumi Seagull was making its presence known, preparing for the confrontation to come. Maria opened the envelope Rivera had given her, reviewing the prayer's instructions, diagrams for the ritual space. Everything seemed straightforward, yet deeply intimidating. Ancient words passed through generations. Precise movements to acknowledge and appease an entity older than recorded Filipino history. We begin at midnight, she told her assembled allies, when the new moon is at its zenith. Until then, we prepare. As they arranged the barracks, creating a ritual space, Maria felt the entity's anticipation like electricity in the air. Tonight would end this one way or another. She only hoped the price demanded wouldn't be more than she could bear to pay. At 11:30, the barracks had been transformed. Bunks pushed against walls, creating a central space where Maria's allies had arranged candles in a circle, using chalk to draw symbols copied from Rivera's grandmother's instructions. Outside, the storm had reached frightening intensity, the base on emergency power generators humming as they struggled against repeated lightning strikes. Chen helped Maria prepare, washing her hair with water infused with the herbs Rivera's grandmother had provided. The ritual required Maria's hair to be clean, unbound, representing its significance as a spiritual connection to her ancestors. Are you sure about this? Chen asked as she carefully combed Maria's wet hair, now hanging loose nearly to her waist. No, Maria admitted, but I'm out of options. While Chen helped Maria, Lieutenant Rivera arrived, soaking wet from the storm. She carried a small wooden box, which she placed carefully on a nearby table. These belonged to my grandmother, Rivera explained, opening the box to reveal ceremonial scissors with ornate handles carved from bone. They've been used for ritual cutting before. They'll serve you better than standard military issue. Maria accepted them with appropriate reverence. Thank you, Lieutenant. Will you stay? Rivera nodded. As long as I can. There's been significant damage to the eastern perimeter fence. Most officers are dealing with security concerns, but it won't keep them occupied indefinitely. As midnight approached, more soldiers arrived, slipping into the barracks despite orders to remain in the mess. Word had spread and curiosity overrode caution. Maria was surprised to see even some skeptics among them, including Jensen and Cooper. They stood near the door, arms crossed, expressions somewhere between doubt and unease. Came to see the show, Santos. Cooper called, though his usual mockery seemed forced. "Hope it's worth disobeying orders for." Maria didn't respond, focusing instead on final preparations. She wore a simple white t-shirt and shorts, her feet bare, her hair flowing free around her shoulders. Around her neck hung her grandmother's amulet alongside Chen's silver cross. Protection from two traditions combining against a force that predated both. At precisely midnight, Maria stepped into the center of the circle. Her audience had grown, to nearly 20 soldiers forming a second larger circle around the ritual space. The air felt charged with tension, with expectation, the storm outside reaching a crescendo that seemed synchronized with the moment. Maria began with the prayers. Rivera had provided ancient words in Tagalog that felt both foreign and familiar on her tongue. As she spoke, the candle flames stretched upward, defying physics, burning blue rather than orange. The soldiers watching shifted uneasily, some making the sign of the cross, others backing toward the door. "Spirits of my ancestors," Maria called in. Tagalog then, English ensuring all present understood. "I acknowledge your presence. I honor the ancient pact. I offer recognition to the one who has followed me, the one who claims my bloodline." The wind outside howled in response, a sound so human it raised goosebumps on every arm in the room. The lights flickered, then stabilized, candles guttering but remaining lit. "Show yourself," Maria commanded, her voice stronger now, imbued with authority she didn't know she possessed. "Appear before these witnesses as you have appeared to me." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air in the center of the circle beside Maria began to shimmer, distort, coalesce. The entity materialized not as the frightening apparition Maria had come to know, but as a woman of extraordinary beauty dressed in pre-colonial Filipino garments, her resemblance to Maria, unmistakable. Gasps echoed through the barracks, even the most hardened skeptics stepping back in shock. Cooper swore softly under his breath while Jensen clutched the doorframe for support. "Jesus Christ," Davidson whispered, "it's real." The entity observed the gathered soldiers with regal indifference, before turning its full attention to Maria. When it spoke, its voice echoed with ages, with wisdom, with hunger. "You have called, I have come. You offer recognition after generations of neglect." Maria's hands trembled, but her voice remained steady. "I acknowledge you, spirit of my ancestors. I offer what connects me to my bloodline, what holds my spiritual strength." Maria raised the ceremonial scissors, the carved bone handles gleaming in the candlelight. With deliberate movements, she gathered her long black hair, holding it out before her. The entity watched with intense focus as Maria brought the scissors to the thick mass of hair and began to cut. The sound of blades through hair seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed barracks. Chunk by chunk, Maria's hair fell to the floor within the circle, each severed piece causing the entity to grow more substantial, more present. Tears streamed down Maria's face, the emotional significance of this sacrifice evident to all watching, but her hands never faltered. When the last lock fell, Maria stood, transformed, her hair now jagged, uneven around her face. She gathered the cut hair from the floor, placing it in a metal bowl Chen had procured from the mess hall. "I offer this sacrifice freely," Maria declared, pouring the ritual oil over her severed hair. In acknowledgement of ancient bonds and renewal of forgotten promises. She struck a match, touching it to the oil-soaked hair, which ignited immediately, burning with unusual intensity. As the smoke rose, the entity seemed to absorb it, growing larger, more defined, more powerful. The ritual instructions indicated this should be the culmination. The spirit acknowledged the sacrifice, accepted, peace restored. But as the last strands of hair turned to ash, the entity remained staring at Maria with expectation, with hunger. "It is not enough," the spirit said, its voice reverberating through the barracks. The disturbance was too great, the awakening too complete. More is required. Fear clutched Maria's heart. "What more do you require?" The entity moved closer, one spectral hand reaching toward Maria's face. "Blood of my blood, voice of my voice. You woke me with touch, I will sleep again with taste." Maria understood with sudden, terrible clarity. "My voice. You want my ability to speak." "Not all," the entity clarified. "A portion only. Fair exchange for generations of silence." The soldiers watched in horrified fascination as Maria considered this demand, her voice, her ability to communicate, a partial but permanent sacrifice. Without it, her military career would certainly end, her future plans dramatically altered. Yet the alternative was worse. The entity would continue to haunt her, would grow stronger, would potentially take something even more precious if denied. Maria squared her shoulders, looking directly into the entity's ancient eyes. "I accept your terms. Take what you require. Then trouble me no more." The entity smiled, a beautiful, terrible expression. "So be it." The moment Maria accepted the entity's terms, the storm outside intensified beyond anything the base had experienced. Windows shattered as gale-force winds slammed against the barracks, the roof groaning under tremendous pressure. Soldiers ducked instinctively, several moving to secure the door, which threatened to tear from its hinges. Within the ritual circle, Maria and the entity remained eerily calm, the eye of a supernatural storm. The spirit raised both hands, placing ethereal fingers on either side of Maria's throat. Its touch felt like ice and fire simultaneously, burning, freezing, penetrating beyond physical sensation to something deeper, more essential. "What's it doing to her?" Chen shouted over the howling wind, trying to move forward only to be restrained by Davidson. Don't interfere, Rivera warned. Breaking the ritual now could be deadly. Maria felt the entity's presence inside her throat, coiling around her vocal cords like living smoke. A pressure built in her chest, rising upward, burning as it ascended. Her mouth opened involuntarily and she screamed a sound unlike anything human that seemed to harmonize with the screaming wind outside. The soldiers watched in horror as visible tendrils of something luminescent emerged from Maria's mouth, flowing into the entity, which absorbed the essence with evident satisfaction. The extraction continued for what felt like eternity but was perhaps only seconds. Maria's scream, growing weaker as portions of her voice were literally pulled from her body. When it finally ended, Maria collapsed to her knees, gasping. The entity, it stepped back, its form, now fully corporeal, entirely solid-looking, as real as any person in the room. It examined its hands with evident pleasure, flexing fingers that now cast actual shadows in the candlelight. Payment accepted, it announced, its voice now containing harmonic elements that sounded disturbingly like Maria's. The pact is renewed, the debt settled. Lieutenant Rivera stepped forward, placing herself between Maria and the entity. Is it done? Then will you trouble her no more? The entity regarded Rivera with ancient eyes. You too carry old blood, warrior woman. Not my bloodline, but known to the others who sleep beneath stone. It gestured toward Maria. She has honored her ancestors. Promise, I am satisfied. Outside, the wind changed character, the howling transforming from rage to something like song. Still powerful, still destructive, but with different intent. Through the broken windows, soldiers could see debris flying across the compound, vehicles overturning, power lines snapping. The base was being systematically dismantled by forces beyond human control. If you're satisfied, then stop this storm. Davidson shouted at the entity. People could die out there. The entity tilted its head, regarding the corporal with mild curiosity. The Hongin Nasumisigo does not arrive quietly nor depart meekly. This is my ... celebration. Maria struggled to her feet, her legs weak, her throat burning. When she tried to speak, only a whisper emerged, her voice hollow, diminished like a radio tuned to static. Please, she managed. Enough. Something in her plea reached the entity. It approached Maria once more, this time with something like tenderness in its ancient face. Child of my blood, you have done well. Your ancestors would be proud. It leaned forward, pressing its forehead to Maria's in a gesture of blessing, or perhaps farewell. Remember me in your dreams when the wind rises, when your children ask why their mother speaks with shadow in her voice. With that final statement, the entity began to dissolve, not disappearing entirely, but transforming, becoming translucent, then transparent, then merging with the wind itself that still howled through the broken windows. As it faded, the storm's character changed again, becoming more natural, more ordinary, still powerful, but no longer imbued with supernatural rage. Maria stood in the center of the ritual circle, her shorn hair scattered around her, her throat bearing a mark identical to the one on her arm. When she tried to thank her fellow soldiers, her voice emerged damaged, present but altered, as though permanently hoarse with strange harmonic undertones that hadn't existed before. It's over, she whispered, the effort painful. It's done. The aftermath was chaos. Emergency sirens blared across the compound as personnel rushed to assess damage, contain fires, secure equipment. The barracks had suffered minimal destruction. Compared to other buildings, its windows shattered but structure intact. Soldiers who had witnessed the ritual moved in stunned silence, helping Maria to a bunk, gathering scattered candles, securing loose items. Against the still powerful wind, Sergeant Miller burst through the door moments later, his uniform soaked, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. What the hell happened here? Why aren't you all in the mess hall as ordered? His eyes fell on Maria, sitting pale and transformed on her bunk. Her jaggedly cut hair and the visible mark on her throat stopped his tirade mid-sentence. Santos, what? He began, but Lieutenant Rivera intercepted him. Medical emergency, sir, she explained smoothly. Private Santos collapsed during the storm. We were providing assistance. Miller looked skeptical, but the evidence of the storm's destruction provided sufficient distraction. There's major damage across the base. All personnel are ordered to emergency stations immediately. As the soldiers filed out, Rivera lingered beside Maria. Can you speak at all? She asked quietly. Maria nodded, trying again, discovering that while whispers came easily, anything louder caused significant pain, produced only damaged sounds. Some she managed. Different now. Rivera helped her to her feet. The medical transport to Manila is still coming. With everything that's happened, no one will question evacuating you now. But Maria shook her head. Need to stay. Finish what started. The ritual is complete, Santos. The entity is gone. Not gone, Maria whispered, touching her throat where the mark pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Part of me now. Need to understand. Before Rivera could respond, Colonel Fletcher appeared in the doorway, surveying the damaged barracks with grim assessment. His gaze fell on Maria, her altered appearance, raising his eyebrows. Lieutenant, explain why Private Santos looks like she's been through a war zone. Rivera straightened to attention. So Private Santos was injured during the storm. Her condition, appears stable, but she requires medical evaluation. Fletcher approached, studying Maria with narrowed eyes. What happened to your hair, Private? And your voice? Maria met his gaze directly. When she spoke, her damaged voice carried strange harmonic undertones that made the colonel step back and "Sacrifice, sir," she whispered, "to end the storm." Something in her tone and the unnatural quality of her damaged voice made Fletcher pause. He had commanded long enough to recognize when situations extended beyond standard military protocol. Whatever that had occurred in this barracks, whatever had happened to Private Santos, clearly fell into that category. "Lieutenant, ensure Private Santos receives immediate medical attention," he ordered, "and I want a full briefing on exactly what transpired here tonight." As Fletcher left, Rivera helped Maria gather her few possessions. Outside, the storm was finally subsiding, the unnatural screaming wind replaced by ordinary rain and occasional thunder. Maria moved to a broken window, looking out at the devastated base. "It's still out there," she whispered, watching, waiting. "I didn't banish it, just satisfied it for now." Rivera nodded, understanding the distinction. "And it took part of your voice as payment." Maria touched her throat, feeling the permanent alteration to her vocal cords. "Fair trade," she whispered. "Could have been worse." Chen approached, carrying Maria's amulet, which had fallen during the ritual. "Was it worth it?" she asked, placing the protective charm around Maria's neck once more. Maria considered this question carefully. The entity was appeased, her haunting ended, but at significant cost. Her military career would certainly be affected, her life permanently altered. Yet she felt strangely at peace, reconciled to a heritage she had previously ignored. "Yes," she whispered, her damaged voice carrying ancient harmonics that would remain with her forever. "Worth knowing who I am, where I come from. Worth remembering what should never have been forgotten." Dawn revealed the storm's true devastation. The base resembled a war zone, buildings, damaged vehicles, overturned equipment scattered across muddy grounds. Military personnel worked tirelessly, securing compromised structures, restoring power, establishing communications with command headquarters, who demanded explanations for the catastrophic weather event. Maria sat in the medical bay, throat examined by confused doctors who found physical damage with no apparent cause. Her vocal cords showed evidence of trauma, but not from any recognizable source. When she spoke, the unnatural harmonic quality of her voice unnerved even experienced medical staff. "I can't explain it," the base physician told Colonel Fletcher. "It's as if portions of her vocal apparatus have been extracted somehow. I've never seen anything like it." Fletcher had been debriefed by Lieutenant Rivera and several witnesses to the ritual. His expression as he approached Maria's examination bed revealed a man struggling between rational explanation and undeniable evidence of something beyond his understanding. "Private Santos," he began, his tone carefully neutral. "I've heard multiple accounts of last night's incident. I need your version of events." Maria nodded, gathering her strength to speak. "Ancient spirit, sir," she whispered, the harmonics in her damaged voice causing Fletcher to flinch slightly. "Attached to my bloodline, required acknowledgement, sacrifice. Your hair and your voice, yes, sir." Fletcher paced beside her bed, clearly uncomfortable. "Under normal circumstances, I'd recommend psychiatric evaluation. But 16 soldiers, including Lieutenant Rivera, corroborate your account. And the storm, double quotes." He shook his head. "Nothing natural about that storm." "No, sir." "What happens now, Santos? Is this spirit gone?" Maria considered her answer carefully. "Appeased, sir. Not gone. Never truly gone." Fletcher's radio crackled with requests for his attention elsewhere. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Regardless of what I believe happened here, Private, your actions appear to have ended an immediate threat to this base. That's what my report will reflect." Alone in the examination room, Maria checked her phone, which had been returned to her, along with other confiscated items. Among numerous missed calls and messages, one stood out from her cousin in the Philippines. The text was brief, devastating. "Lola passed in her sleep last night during the storm. She was calling your name." Grief washed over Maria in crushing waves. Her grandmother gone at the exact moment the entity had taken Maria's voice. Too precise to be coincidence, too painful to be anything but connected. She had known somehow that her grandmother had performed the same ritual in her youth, had similarly sacrificed. Now Maria wondered if their confrontations with the entity had linked them across time, if her grandmother's death had somehow facilitated Maria's survival. Nurse Chen entered, finding Maria silently weeping. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" Maria handed her the phone. Chen read the message, her expression softening with understanding. "I'm so sorry, Maria." She knew Maria whispered. She felt it happening. Chen sat beside her. "What will you do now?" It was a profound question, extending beyond immediate medical concerns to Maria's future in the military with her permanently altered voice. Regulations regarding physical requirements were clear. Her condition would likely result in medical discharge. Go home, Maria decided. Honor her. Learn what she knew. As they spoke, the lights in the examination room flickered briefly. Outside the window, the air shimmered momentarily, in a now familiar pattern. The entity might be appeased, but its presence lingered, reminding Maria of their connection. Lieutenant Rivera arrived an hour later with news. "Colonel Fletcher has arranged compassionate leave for you, Santos. You'll be transported to Manila then. Commercial flight to the States for your grandmother's funeral. Maria nodded gratefully. There's something else, Rivera added, her voice lowering. The burial site your unit disturbed. It's been completely exposed by the storm. The wind, literally, excavated it, revealing dozens of artifacts and remains. Archaeological teams are being called in. This development troubled Maria. Should be Rivera honored, not studied. Rivera nodded. I've suggested involving local cultural authorities, but decisions will be made above our pay grade. As Maria prepared to leave the base, she experienced something unexpected, a vision that came not as dream or hallucination but as direct knowledge flowing through her blood. She saw her grandmother not as the elderly woman she had known but as a young woman performing the same ritual decades earlier, cutting her long hair, offering it to the same entity that had claimed part of Maria's voice. The vision expanded, showing more women through generations, back through Spanish colonization to pre-colonial times, each facing the Hangin na Sumisigo, each offering sacrifice, each maintaining the ancient pact through blood and commitment. Maria understood suddenly that she was not victim but guardian, part of an unbroken line of women who served as bridges between worlds, maintaining balance between the seen and unseen. When the transport arrived to take her to Manila, Maria was escorted by Chen Davidson and others who had witnessed the ritual. Their attitudes toward her had transformed, not pity, not fear, but respect for what she had endured, what she had willingly sacrificed. Will you come back? Chen asked as they said goodbye. Maria touched her throat, feeling the mark that pulsed. With her heartbeat, a different role. Now she whispered, different path. Davidson, who had been skeptical initially, now regarded Maria with something approaching reverence. Whatever happens, Santos, you've got people here who know the truth, who saw what you did. As the transport pulled away, Maria caught a final glimpse of the burial site, now cordoned off with military barriers. The entity's presence lingered there, stronger than elsewhere, a reminder of ancient connections, promises made, promises kept. She understood instinctively that her relationship with the Hangin na Sumisigo had not ended but merely changed, from haunting to partnership, from fear to respect. During the flight to Manila, Maria slipped into dream, finding herself in a familiar yet strange landscape. Her grandmother waited there, appearing as she had in youth, beautiful, strong, her long hair uncut, her voice whole. You did well, Apo, her grandmother said, using the affectionate Tagalog term for grandchild. You remembered when others forgot. You're gone, Maria whispered, even in dreams, her voice damaged, carrying those unearthly harmonics. You left when it took my voice, her grandmother smiled sadly. My time was ending, yours beginning. The spirit knew this marked the transition in its own way. What happens now, Lola? You carry knowledge, responsibility. You will teach those who come after just as I taught you. Her grandmother's form began to fade, merging with mist, with memory. The wind remembers Maria. The wind always remembers. Maria woke as the plane began its descent into Manila, feeling fundamentally changed. The sacrifice of her voice seemed smaller now compared to what she had gained: connection, understanding, purpose. Her short, jagged hair would grow back differently. Her voice would remain forever, altered, carrying echoes of something ancient, something powerful. The entity had taken but also given. Maria was no longer simply American or Filipino or soldier, but guardian of knowledge that stretched back generations. What waited beyond her grandmother's funeral, beyond her likely medical discharge, was unclear, but the path had been set centuries before she was born. As the plane touched down, Maria felt the wind rise to greet her, not screaming now, but whispering. Welcome, recognition, acknowledgement. In its voice she heard her grandmother, her ancestors, all the women of her bloodline who had kept ancient promises, remembered ancient pacts. They had not abandoned her. They had been waiting for her to remember them. 1 year later, Maria stood at the edge of the burial grounds, watching as local spiritual leaders performed blessing ceremonies. Her hair had grown out, now styled in a short, practical cut that suited her new life. When she spoke, her voice still carried that distinctive harmonic quality, permanently altered yet somehow fitting for a woman who now straddled multiple worlds. As predicted, the military had medically discharged her, though with full honors and benefits. Colonel Fletcher's report had described her actions during the storm in heroic terms, carefully omitting supernatural elements while acknowledging her sacrifice and service to fellow soldiers. The official explanation for her voice involved injury from wind-driven debris during rescue efforts. The truth lived in unofficial channels, and the memories of those who had witnessed in the stories now whispered among soldiers about the night the wind screamed at Lincoln Base. Some of those witnesses had maintained contact, particularly Chen, who stood beside Maria, now watching the ceremony with respectful attention. They're almost finished, Chen observed. Will it be enough to settle the spirits? Maria nodded. After months of bureaucratic battles, the military had finally relinquished control of the burial site to local indigenous authorities. Today's ceremony marked the formal return of ancestral remains and artifacts to their proper resting place with appropriate cultural protocols. Proper acknowledgement, Maria whispered, her damaged voice carrying on the breeze. Proper respect. That's all they ever wanted. Lieutenant Rivera, now Captain Rivera, approached from the military observation post. The paperwork's complete. This site is officially recognized as protected cultural heritage land. No more training exercises, no more disturbances. Maria smiled gratefully. Rivera had been instrumental in navigating military bureaucracy, advocating for cultural sensitivity when many officers preferred to dismiss the entire incident as mass hysteria or environmental anomaly. "Thank you, Maria," said the harmonics in her voice rippling like water. "For understanding, believing." Rivera nodded. "My grandmother sends her regards. She says you're welcome to visit her when you're ready to learn more." Since her discharge, Maria had immersed herself in studying Filipino spiritual traditions, spending months in her grandmother's village, learning from elders, recognizing how thoroughly Western education had separated her from ancestral knowledge. She had returned to the base not as soldier but as cultural consultant, officially helping facilitate the repatriation ceremony, unofficially ensuring the entity and others like it received proper acknowledgement. As the ceremony concluded, Maria felt a familiar presence, not threatening now but watchful. The Hangin na Sumisigo lingered at the edges of her perception, a permanent connection forged through blood sacrifice ritual. Sometimes in dreams the entity still visited, showing Maria visions of the past, teaching her forgotten practices, guiding her toward understanding her role as guardian. "Do you regret it?" Chen asked as they walked back toward the vehicles. "Sacrificing your voice, your career?" Maria considered the question. Her life had transformed in ways she never anticipated. After discharge, she had moved to her grandmother's village, living in the small house. She had inherited learning traditions that would have disappeared without her intervention. Local children called her Ang Babe na May Dalawang Tinig, woman with two voices, both feared and respected for her connection to the spirit world. "No regrets," she answered honestly. "Found purpose, found belonging." Chen smiled. "You sound like a wise woman from a folktale now." "Hard to believe you were once just another private complaining about mess hall food." They both laughed, though Maria's laughter, like her speech, carried those otherworldly undertones that still unnerved those who didn't know her story. Davidson approached, joining their small group. After his enlistment ended, he had taken a civilian contractor position on base, partly to remain close to the extraordinary events he had witnessed. "Ceremony went well," he observed, "but something still feels unfinished." Maria nodded, understanding his perception. One more thing needed. She led them to a specific marker at the edge of the burial ground, the very stone she had touched. That fateful day, kneeling before it, she removed a small cloth bundle from her bag, unwrapping it to reveal a lock of her hair preserved from the ritual, along with personal offerings, a military patch from her uniform, dog tags. She no longer needed small items connecting her former life to her current purpose. "Full circle," she whispered, placing the offerings at the base of the stone. "Acknowledgement, remembrance, respect." As she spoke, the air stirred around them, though no wind blew elsewhere. The sensation of presence intensified, the entity manifesting, not visibly, but perceptibly recognized by those who had witnessed, acknowledged by those who understood. Davidson and Chen stepped back instinctively, but Maria remained kneeling, unafraid. She had learned that fear empowered such entities while respect established boundaries, proper relationship. The Hangin na Sumisigo was neither benevolent nor malevolent, but simply was ancient, powerful, deserving of acknowledgement but not worship. "It's here, isn't it?" Chen whispered. Maria nodded. "Always here, always watching." Since the ritual, Maria had discovered her sensitivity to spiritual energies extended beyond her specific entity. She could sense disturbances at other sacred sites, could feel when boundaries between worlds thinned, could sometimes hear voices others missed. Her grandmother had possessed similar abilities, had served similar functions in her community. A bridge, a translator, a guardian. After completing her offerings, Maria rejoined her friends. "Finished now," she said, properly honored. As they walked away, Maria felt the entity's satisfaction like a warm current against her skin. The restlessness that had drawn her back to the base settled into completion, into closure. She had fulfilled her obligation, maintained the ancient pact, ensured proper protocols would protect both the living and the dead. "What's next for you?" Rivera asked as they reached the vehicles. "Back to the village," Maria nodded. "For now, teaching younger ones what I've learned." What she didn't share was how local families had begun bringing children to her, children who saw things others missed, heard voices in the wind, experienced connections to the unseen world. Children who might have been diagnosed, medicated, their gifts suppressed in Western contexts, but who under her guidance were learning to navigate their sensitivities with strength and purpose. "You found your calling," Rivera observed. "Found my ancestors," Maria corrected. "Remembered what was forgotten." Later that evening, as Maria prepared to return to the village, she stood alone at the edge of the base, watching sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The wind rose, gentle now, carrying scents of earth and growing things, a natural counterpoint to the mechanical sounds of the military installation. In that wind, Maria heard whispers, her grandmother, her ancestors, the entity that had changed her life. They spoke not in fear or threat, but in recognition, in continuity, in the eternal cycle of remembering and being remembered. "Salamat sa iyong sakripisyo," the wind seemed to say. Thank you for your sacrifice. Maria touched her throat, feeling the mark that still pulsed with her heartbeat. Salamat saya, iyong kaalaman, she whispered, her damaged voice blending with the wind's voice, creating something new, something powerful, something that bridged worlds as she herself now did. Thank you for your knowledge. Somewhere between soldier and shaman, between American and Filipino, between modern and ancient, Maria Santos had found her place. The sacrifice had been real, the cost permanent. But the understanding gained was beyond price. The wind rose again, this time carrying her name, not screaming but singing with harmonics that matched her altered voice. Maria smiled and sang back, her dual-toned voice joining the ancient chorus that had always been there, waiting for her to remember, waiting for her to listen, waiting for her to become.